The first time Eli Hartman ever really looked at me, it was raining, and I was holding a diploma I didn't feel like I'd earned, standing 3 feet away from the boy I'd loved in silence for 4 years. "Say something," he said, his voice cracking on the second word, rain sliding down his jaw, his gown soaked through at the shoulders. "Noah. Please. Say something." I couldn't. For years of silence doesn't just break because someone finally decides to look at you. It cracks slow, like ice on a lake that's been frozen since November. And I was still standing on it, not sure if it would hold. That's where this story starts. But if you want to understand why that moment nearly broke both of us, you have to go back to the beginning, to a dorm room, a broken air conditioner, and a boy who never looked at me. Until he did. Freshman year, they paired us by some algorithm that was supposed to match compatible lifestyles. I don't know what box Eli Hartman checked that landed him with me, but I remember the exact second he walked into room 214B, duffel bag slung over one shoulder, hair a mess from the August heat, and said, "You're not what I expected." "Is that good or bad?" I asked. He looked at me for a second too long, the kind of look that makes your stomach drop before you even know why, and said, "Ask me in May." I laughed it off. He didn't. He just dropped his bag on the bare mattress and started unpacking like the conversation was already over. That was Eli. He said things that lingered and then walked away before you could ask him what he meant. We were opposites on paper. I was the kid who color-coded his class schedule and panicked if I hadn't read the syllabus twice. Eli was the kid who showed up to the first day of chemistry with a skateboard under his arm and somehow still pulled a 4.0 by December. He played guitar badly and sang worse, but loud, at 2 in the morning, when he thought I was asleep. I wasn't. I was never asleep when Eli was awake in that room, because something about his presence kept my whole body alert, like a held breath I didn't know I was holding. We became friends by accident, the way most important things happen, not through some grand gesture, but through 6 months of small ones. Him leaving half a sandwich on my desk after a shift at the campus deli because he made too much. Me covering for him during finals week when he overslept through a lecture, texting him the notes before he even asked. Late night walks around the quad when neither of us could sleep, talking about nothing, our families, our fears, the things we wanted and were too afraid to say out loud. I never told him I was gay. Not because I thought he'd hate me for it, Eli wasn't like that, but because saying it out loud to him felt like handing him a weapon he didn't know he was holding. If he knew, and he looked at me differently even once, I don't think I could have survived it. So I buried it. I told myself it was easier to love him in silence than to risk losing him in truth. That was the deal I made with myself. I didn't know yet how expensive that deal would turn out to be. It was February of freshman year, and the heater in our dorm broke during the coldest week of the semester. Maintenance said it'd be 3 days before they could fix it. Eli, ever practical, showed up that night with every blanket he owned and dropped them all on the floor between our beds. "We're not freezing separately," he said. "Get down here." I remember lying there in the dark, close enough to feel the heat radiating off his body, close enough to hear every breath he took, and thinking that if I moved even an inch closer, something in me would break open and there'd be no closing it again. "Noah," he said, after a long silence. "Can I ask you something weird?" "Sure." "Do you ever feel like you're waiting for something? Like there's this whole life happening around you, and you're just waiting for the part where it starts feeling real?" I turned my head toward him. In the dark, I could just make out the shape of his face, his eyes catching the little bit of light from the window. "All the time," I said. "I think that's just what being 18 feels like." "Maybe," he said quietly. "Or maybe I'm just waiting for the right person to make it feel real." My heart was pounding so loud I was sure he could hear it. I wanted, more than I have ever wanted anything, to ask him what he meant. To ask if there was a person. To ask if, God help me, that person could be me. Instead, I said, "Yeah. Maybe." He didn't say anything else. A few minutes later, his breathing slowed, and I lay there awake for another hour, replaying his words, turning them over like a stone I couldn't stop touching, looking for an edge that would tell me what he really meant. The next morning, it was like the conversation never happened. He made coffee, complained about his 8 a.m. class, and left without looking at me twice. That was the pattern I'd learn over the next 4 years. Eli would crack a door open just wide enough for me to see something real inside him, and then close it before I could step through. Sophomore year, Eli started dating a guy named Marcus from the swim team. I found out the way you find out most things you're not ready for, by accident, walking into the dining hall and seeing them at a corner table, Eli laughing at something Marcus said, his hand resting easily on the table an inch from Marcus's. I stood in the doorway for a full 10 seconds before I could make my legs move again. That was the first time I understood, really understood, that Eli was gay too, or at least not straight, and it should have felt like hope. Instead, it felt like grief, because it meant the version of him that could love a man already existed, and he'd chosen someone who wasn't me. I never told him how much those 3 months hurt. I smiled through it. I asked polite questions about Marcus at dinner. I congratulated him when they went to formal together, and I went home that night and sat on my bathroom floor for an hour, angry at myself for feeling something I had no right to feel about a boy who'd never once looked at me the way I looked at him. When they broke up in March, Eli showed up at my door at midnight, eyes red, and said, "Can I just sit with you for a while?" I let him in. He sat on the edge of my bed and didn't say much, just stared at his hands. Finally, he said, "I don't think I even miss him. I think I miss the idea that someone finally picked me." "Anyone would pick you," I said, before I could stop myself. He looked up. Really looked at me, the way he had that first day in the dorm, like he was trying to read something written in a language he almost understood. "Would you?" he asked. The room went very quiet. My whole body went still, waiting, hoping, terrified. "I'm your best friend," I said, because it was the only thing I could say that wouldn't destroy everything. Best friends pick each other. That's not the same thing. Something in his face closed, like a curtain falling. "Right," he said. "Of course." And the moment passed, the way all our moments passed, right up to the edge of something real, and then pulled back at the last second, like neither of us trusted the ground beneath it. By junior year, something between us had shifted, though neither of us named it. We still lived together, still walked to class together, but there were gaps now, silences that used to be comfortable and had started to feel loaded, like unexploded things we were both stepping carefully around. Eli started staying out later. I started studying more, throwing myself into internship applications, telling myself it was ambition and not avoidance. We were both, I think, trying to outrun the same question, just in opposite directions. It was Rosa, my one close friend outside our dorm, the only person who knew the truth about how I felt, who finally said what I'd been too scared to admit. "You're in love with him," she said one night, over cheap wine in her apartment. "You've been in love with him since freshman year, and you're going to graduate having never told him, and you're going to spend the rest of your life wondering." "It's not that simple," I said. "It's exactly that simple," she said. "You're just scared." She was right, of course. I was scared, of losing him, of watching his face change if he found out, of a friendship that had become the architecture of my entire college life collapsing under the weight of one true sentence. So I said nothing. I let junior year pass in near silence, let the space between our beds turn into miles even though we were still living 4 feet apart. I told myself it was safer this way. I didn't yet understand that silence has a cost too, and that cost was compounding every single day I didn't pay it. Senior year began with a wedding, Eli's older sister, Claire, marrying her college sweetheart in a barn upstate. Eli asked me to come as his +1, so I'm not stuck talking to my aunts all night, and I said yes before I'd even finished processing the question. It was the first time I saw him in a suit. I want to tell you it wasn't a big deal, that I didn't have to excuse myself to the bathroom for 2 full minutes just to remember how to breathe normally, but that would be a lie, and I promised myself I'd tell this story honestly. At the reception, during the slow dances, Eli grabbed my hand and pulled me onto the floor before I could protest. "Everyone's paired off," he said. "I'm not standing here alone like a loser." "We're both guys," I said. "People will stare." "Let them," he said, and something in his voice made my chest tighten. "I'm tired of caring what people think I'm allowed to want." He put his hand on my waist. I put mine on his shoulder. We swayed there under string lights, close enough that I could smell the clean, warm scent of him, close enough to feel his heartbeat if I let myself imagine it, and for 3 minutes, I let myself believe this was real, that this was us, finally, without a script, without an excuse. "Noah," he said quietly, his mouth close to my ear. "Yeah? I need to tell you something, and I need you to not make it weird." My whole body went electric. "Okay." He pulled back just enough to look at me, and for one long, suspended second, his eyes dropped to my mouth. I felt the air between us change, felt gravity itself lean us half an inch closer. And then his cousin barreled into him, drunk and laughing, demanding he come take a group photo, and the moment shattered like glass on tile. Eli laughed it off, squeezed my hand once, and let himself get pulled away. He never finished that sentence. Not that night. Not for months. I didn't sleep at all on the drive home. I kept replaying the half-second before his cousin interrupted us, the way his eyes had dropped to my mouth, the way his breath had caught. I didn't know if I'd imagined it. I was terrified I hadn't. We didn't talk about the wedding. Neither of us brought it up, and the not bringing it up became its own kind of wall between us, brick by silent brick. 3 weeks later, it all came apart at a party neither of us wanted to be at. Eli had been drinking more than usual, standing too close to a guy named Devin from his econ class, laughing loud at everything Devin said. I watched from across the room, feeling something ugly and possessive twist in my chest, something I had no right to feel and couldn't stop feeling anyway. Later, in the kitchen, when I finally cornered him to ask if he was ready to leave, he was flushed from alcohol and something else. "Why do you care?" he snapped, when I said Devin seemed like he was hovering too close. "You've never cared who I talked to before." "I'm not saying I care," I said, too fast, too defensive. "I just think you can do better than a guy who talks about himself for 45 minutes straight." "Maybe I like being wanted," Eli said, voice sharp now. "Maybe it's nice when someone actually acts like they want me, instead of just standing there being my best friend for 4 years and never." He cut himself off, jaw tight, eyes suddenly wet. "Never what?" I said, my heart slamming against my ribs. "Nothing," he said. "Forget it." "Eli." "Never what?" He looked at me for a long moment, something desperate and furious and heartbroken all at once behind his eyes. "Never mind, Noah. Just, forget I said anything. I need some air." He walked out of that party alone, and I let him, because I was too much of a coward to chase after a sentence he wouldn't finish. We didn't speak for 11 days. It was the longest we'd gone without talking since the day we met. 11 days of silence in a shared room is its own kind of torture. We passed each other like strangers who happened to own the same furniture, a nod in the doorway, a muttered "your mail's on the desk," nothing more. I told myself I could survive like that until May. I told myself a lot of things that spring that weren't true. It was Rosa, again, who broke the standoff, though she didn't mean to. She'd invited us both to her birthday dinner without telling either of us the other was coming, and by the time I realized, it was too late to back out gracefully. Eli showed up 10 minutes after me, in a soft gray sweater I'd never seen before, hair damp from the rain that had started that afternoon and hadn't let up since. He saw me across the restaurant and, for a second, his whole face did something complicated, relief, hesitation, something under both of those I couldn't name, before he arranged it into something neutral and sat 2 seats away. We made it through dinner on politeness. It was Rosa, 3 glasses of wine deep, who finally slammed her hand on the table and said, "I love you both, but watching you two orbit each other without landing is genuinely exhausting, and I refuse to sit through it for one more meal." "Rosa," I said. "No," she said. "I'm serious." "Eli, tell him what you told me on the phone last week." "Noah, tell him what you told me freshman year." "I'm going to the bathroom for exactly 6 minutes, and when I come back, I want this fixed or at least started." She left. The silence she left behind was so loud it had a pulse. "What did you tell her?" Eli finally asked, staring at his water glass. "Doesn't matter," I said. "What did you tell her?" He looked up. Rain streaked the window behind him, blurring the streetlights into long gold ribbons. "I told her I think I ruined the only real thing I've ever had, because I got scared and picked a fight instead of just telling you the truth." My heart was climbing into my throat. "What truth?" He opened his mouth. Closed it. Shook his head, like he was physically fighting something down. "Not here," he said. "Not like this. I'll tell you. I promise I will. Just, not in the middle of Rosa's birthday dinner with garlic bread on the table." It wasn't the answer I wanted, but it was more than I'd had in 11 days, and for the first time in almost 2 weeks, I let myself breathe all the way out. We walked home together that night, under one umbrella because Eli had forgotten his, close enough that our shoulders bumped every few steps, and neither of us moved away. Spring semester of senior year moved fast after that, the particular, frantic speed of an ending everyone can see coming. Job offers, apartment leases in cities none of us had lived in yet, the low hum of a life about to scatter in 100 directions. Eli and I found our way back to something like our old rhythm, but with a new current underneath it, something neither of us named but both of us felt. He started finding reasons to be near me. Studying at my desk instead of his. Walking me to my night class since it's on the way, even though it wasn't, not really. Twice, I caught him looking at me across a room with an expression so unguarded it made my chest ache, like he'd forgotten to build the wall back up in time. One night in April, we ended up on the roof of our building, a spot we weren't technically allowed to be, watching the city lights instead of studying for finals like we were supposed to. "Can I ask you something?" I said. "That night at Rosa's dinner." "What truth?" Eli was quiet for a long moment, turning a loose thread on his sleeve between his fingers. "Do you remember the wedding?" he asked. "The dance?" My whole body went still. "Yeah. I was going to tell you something that night," he said. Before my cousin interrupted. "I've thought about that half a second probably 1,000 times since. What I would have said if she hadn't grabbed me." "What would you have said?" He turned to look at me, and in the glow of the city below us, his eyes looked almost bright enough to be their own kind of light. "That I've been in love with you since sophomore year," he said, quiet, steady, like he'd rehearsed it so many times it had worn smooth. "Maybe longer. I dated Marcus because I thought if I just found someone else to want, I'd stop wanting you so badly it hurt. It didn't work. Nothing worked. I just kept coming back to you." I couldn't speak. For years of careful, guarded silence, and it was collapsing all at once, so fast I couldn't find the floor. "Noah," he said, softer now, searching my face. "Say something. Please. I've loved you since the day you walked into our room and said I wasn't what you expected," I finally managed. "I never told you because I thought it would ruin everything. I thought loving you quietly was safer than losing you loudly." Something broke open in his face, relief and disbelief and 4 years of held breath all at once. He leaned toward me, slow, like he was giving me every chance in the world to stop him. I didn't stop him. Our mouths were an inch apart, close enough that I could feel the warmth of his breath, close enough that my whole body had gone electric and still, when his phone rang, loud and sudden in the quiet, and he flinched back like he'd been burned. It was his mother. His grandfather had been rushed to the hospital. He left that night on a red-eye flight home, and the almost kiss stayed exactly that, almost, for 3 more agonizing weeks, while he sat at a hospital bedside 2 states away and I sat in our empty dorm room, replaying the inch of space between us over and over, terrified it would never close again. His grandfather recovered, slowly. Eli came back changed in a way that's hard to explain unless you've watched someone brush that close to losing a person they love, quieter, more thoughtful, carrying something heavier behind his eyes. But something else had changed too. He pulled back from me, gently but unmistakably, and I didn't understand why until Rosa, blunt as always, spelled it out for me over coffee. "He's scared," she said. "He told you the truth and then almost lost his grandfather in the same week. He probably thinks loving you out loud is what invites disaster. People do that, they take 2 things that happen close together and convince themselves one caused the other." "That's not how any of this works," I said. "You know that," she said. "He might not, yet." So I waited. I gave him space, the way I wish someone had given me all those years I spent hiding. And slowly, over the last stretch of senior year, I watched him come back, not all at once, but the way spring comes, a little more light every day until you look up and the whole season has changed. By the time finals ended, we were closer than we'd ever been, not officially anything, no label, no defining conversation, just 2 people who'd said the truth out loud once and were learning, carefully, how to live inside it. We held hands sometimes, when no one was around. He kissed my forehead once, at 2 in the morning, after a study session that ran too long, and neither of us mentioned it the next day, though I thought about it every hour until graduation. I thought we had time to figure out the rest. I was wrong about that too, though not in the way I feared. The morning of graduation, it rained, the kind of sudden, heavy spring rain that turns a ceremony into chaos, scatters programs across wet grass, sends everyone's carefully ironed gowns clinging to their shoulders within minutes. I didn't see Eli until after, in the crush of families and photographs and relieved, exhausted embraces. He found me near the fountain at the edge of the quad, both of us already soaked, diploma cases held awkwardly under our arms like we didn't know what to do with our own hands anymore. "Hey, graduate," he said, and even through the rain, even with everything about to change, his voice did the same thing to my chest it always had. "Hey yourself." He looked at me for a long moment, something building behind his eyes, and then he said the words that started this whole story, "Say something. Noah. Please. Because here's what I hadn't told you yet, what I'm telling you now, at the place where this story actually begins to make sense." 2 days before graduation, Eli had gotten a job offer. In Seattle. 3,000 miles from the offer I'd accepted in Boston. And in the chaos of finals and packing and goodbyes, neither of us had said out loud what that meant for whatever this was between us. Standing there in the rain, diploma in hand, Eli said it first. "I turned it down," he said. "The Seattle job. I turned it down 3 hours ago." "Eli. I know it was a good offer. I know everyone thinks I'm insane. But I spent 4 years being too scared to say something true, and I am not spending the next however many years 3,000 miles away from you, wondering what would have happened if I just—" He stopped, breathing hard, rain running down his face like it was crying for him. "I love you, Noah. Actually love you. Not almost. Not quietly. I want to try this, really try it, starting now, out loud, where everyone can see, because I'm done being scared of what I want." I crossed the last 3 feet of space between us, the space it had taken 4 years, a broken heater, a wedding, a fight, a hospital scare, and one rainy graduation morning to finally close, and I kissed him. It wasn't dramatic or perfect. Our noses bumped. Someone's parent nearby said "oh" in surprised delight. Neither of us cared. It was the kind of kiss that felt less like a beginning and more like an arrival, like something that had been true for 4 years was finally allowed to exist in the open air. When we broke apart, Eli rested his forehead against mine, both of us breathless, both of us grinning like idiots in the pouring rain. "So," he said. "Boston?" "Boston," I said. "You're really doing this? Turning down a great job for me?" "I'm not turning it down for you," he said, pulling back just enough to look at me properly. "I'm turning it down for us. There's a difference. I want to build something, Noah. Not chase something anymore." We got an apartment in Boston that August, small, with a radiator that clanks all winter and a window that looks out over a street lined with maple trees. Eli found a job he actually loves. I did too, eventually. We fight sometimes, the way anyone does, but never again with 4 years of unspoken truth sitting underneath it, poisoning the words before they're even said. Some nights, when it's quiet, I think about that first night in the dorm, the broken heater, the blankets on the floor, him asking if I ever felt like I was waiting for life to start feeling real. I know the answer now. I know exactly when it started. It started the day the boy who never looked at me finally did, and never stopped again.